Queen formed in 1970 when lead singer Freddie Mercury joined lead guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor's previous band, Smile. Bassist John Deacon joined in early 1971. Their self-titled debut album was released in 1973. Early singles Seven Seas of Rye and Killer Queen ushered the band into popularity around the world. This success continued well into the 1980s, until the controversial music video for I Wanna Break Free was banned in the US. Queen never had the same success in America until Wayne's World revived Bohemian Rhapsody in 1992. Despite that setback, Queen continued as a massive worldwide band. Their 1985 Live Aid performance is considered one of the best live performances, if not the best. Sometime in the mid to late 80s, Mercury was diagnosed HIV positive. Exactly when is not known, although it is generally believed to be 1987. The other members would not learn of this until 1989. Mercury spent the last few years of his life recording with Queen until his death on November 24, 1991. In 2010, a Queen biopic was announced with Sacha Baron Cohen set to play Mercury. He eventually left the project citing creative differences, including the film's rating. Cohen wanted an R-rated movie, while May and Taylor, who were producers on the film, wanted it to be PG. There were other disagreements as well.
My first meeting I should have never carried on because a member of the band, I won't say who, said...
Brian May.
I won't say who.
Yeah.
But he said, this is such a great movie because it's got such an amazing thing happens in the middle of the movie.
Uh-huh.
I go, well, what happens in the middle of the movie? He goes, Freddie dies.
Middle of the movie.
I go, all right. So you mean it's a bit like Pulp Fiction? The end is the middle, and the middle is the end.
Right,
I go, all right,
right,
that's
right.
really, that's a wild movie. All right, that's interesting. I never thought about that. He goes, no, normal movie. I go, so wait a minute, what happens in the second half of the movie? He said, well, we see how the band carries on from strength to strength.
The Usual Suspects and X-Men director Bryan Singer was eventually brought on to direct the film, now called Bohemian Rhapsody, with Rami Malek set to play Mercury. Production began in 2017. After a few months of filming, 20th Century Fox announced that Singer had been fired. Rumors stated that Singer was erratic, often late to set, and sometimes disappearing entirely. Singer claims this was due to an illness in the family. Rumors also suggested something similar happened during the production of 2016's X-Men Apocalypse. Dexter Fletcher was brought in to direct the last 2 to 3 weeks of production and oversee post-production, although Singer is credited as the sole director due to guild rules. The film tells the story of Queen's formation and success, ending with Mercury's diagnosis and the Live Aid performance. Watching this movie again for this review, the only thing I could think is, what is the point? What is the point of a biopic? They're not very informative. You're going to learn more from watching a documentary or even just reading the Wikipedia article. Facts are altered, truths are omitted, and some stuff is just flat out made up. Then maybe it's to celebrate the person or people the film is about, which is fine, I guess, but then that's not particularly interesting. Just to spend 2 hours going, hey, isn't insert person here great? And you might say, well, it isn't a documentary, just look at it as a movie on its own, separated from the real people. The problem is that that's kind of impossible. I can't compartmentalize my brain and pretend that The Runaways or Queen never existed. And Bohemian Rhapsody is a movie that nobody would care about if it wasn't about one of the biggest bands in history. As I said in my review of Music of the Heart, biopics are hard. Having to take random real-life events and convert them into a 3-act narrative is not a task that I envy. Bohemian Rhapsody covers about 15 years without a real through line of what the story is. It is vaguely about Queen and Freddie Mercury, but their formation in early years are dealt with pretty early on, and most of their biggest hits and albums are dealt with through quick montages. The main story beat that could work as narrative is Mercury's illness, which does not happen until about an hour and a half in of a 2-hour movie. If the entire movie was about Mercury having to come to terms with his illness in the lead up to Live Aid, that's a story, even if that isn't totally factually accurate. Making A Night at the Opera could be a movie, or making those last couple Queen albums where everyone knew Mercury was dying. Something like that. But what we got instead was unbelievably generic. If you've seen a music biopic in the last decade or two, You've seen them all for the most part. There is such a rigid formula. Patrick Willems describes it well in his video on the subject. But it's especially a problem in a movie about this specific band. Queen was never about rules or formulas, as is very ironically pointed out in the film itself.
Formulas work. Let's stick with the formulas. I like formulas.
They constantly pushed boundaries and experimented. They're interesting musicians and people. So it's really frustrating when the movie about them is so boring and formulaic. I also just hate the scene with Mike Myers. He plays a fictional character of an exec that just doesn't get it. Myers is only in the movie so that they can make a painful Wayne's World reference.
Well, that's the kind of song teenagers can crank up the volume in their car and bang their heads to. Bohemian Rhapsody will never be that song.
Cringe. There's no other word for it. This makes me cringe. It's embarrassing.
The dialogue is weird too. It's one thing for me or any Queen fan to talk about the band's significance and their ability to go beyond genre, but it's quite strange to see the fictionalized members of the band saying that stuff. It comes across as a little too self-aware and makes the band look kinda egotistical. It feels kind of pointless to talk about the editing because there already is a solid video on YouTube explaining why it doesn't really work and how odd it was when the film won an Oscar for editing. But I do think it's fair to point out that it's not some great mystery why the editing is the way it is. As they always are, the studios are concerned about pacing, so a lot of the dialogue scenes are edited at a way too fast pace because studios are terrified of short attention spans.
I went to Fox the other day.
Okay.
And had them fire up the Avid and all the media because I wanted that scene the way I'd originally cut it.
Huh.
So someday I'm going to do a fucking dissertation and show, here's how I cut it originally, and then here's what happens when too many cooks get in the kitchen and are
So
paranoid about pace.
The edit in the film is not yours.
No, it's mine, but I mean, it was mine after tremendous amount of notes and pressure to cut down.
John Ottman is a great editor, and he did do some cool stuff, but it's a PG-13 studio blockbuster, so it fell victim to test screenings and overthinking. The one through line thematically is pretending to be someone you're not. Characters in the film are always saying that they know Freddy, or that they understand him more than anyone else, or just flat out telling him who he is. It's an identity crisis. This one was resolved with Freddy deciding his own narrative and story, which is decent, but doesn't quite come to the surface enough. It's there, but not developed because there needs to be a montage every 5 minutes. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Freddy tries to come out as bisexual to Mary, and she just flat out tells him that he's gay. Now, I obviously don't and can't ever know the real Mercury. I do not know or care if he was gay or bi or whatever, but it was heart-wrenching to see the fictionalized character confess something so personal only to be shut down. Bi erasure is a difficult thing, and I wish the movie had explored this idea more. It's really just this one scene. Of course, the highlight of the movie is the Live Aid sequence. Seeing that in the movie theater was incredible. It kind of makes the whole movie worth it. No matter what I think of the rest of the movie, I'm still glad I saw it, even if just for one scene. Made for roughly $50 million, Bohemian Rhapsody grossed $904.4 million worldwide. The film won 4 Oscars: Best Editing, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Actor for Malick. The film received mixed reviews. I don't think this is a very good movie. It warps the Queen's story into a very generic film that is more interested in hitting the usual beats of a biopic than effectively telling the story. It's kind of boring as you spend the first 90 minutes alternating between music montages and weirdly edited dialogue scenes until the third act. Malick is great. He deserved that Oscar. He really committed and I think nailed it. The actors playing the other 3 members are also pretty good, but Malick is the standout. And again, Live Aid is stellar. Overall, it's a disappointing and dull experience, but it has its moments.